Hey guys, so I wanted to share an update on my explosive shot DEADEYE. I've had a ton of fun with this build, and at this point I'm currently farming T15s on a 5 link and level 19 gems, and the build is a ton of fun to play with. If you're looking for a tanky character with damage as well, you need to look towards Spark, Stormweaver, or maybe an Infernalist minion. Or you can build Energy Shield with Grim Feast, which is what a lot of Deadeyes are doing. That will make your build a lot tankier. Now, for those complaining about how unbalanced the game is currently, the game is currently in early access and it was released less than a month ago. So obviously it's far from balanced and there's a lot of things to be worked on. And that is one of the main reasons why I'm hesitant to go Energy Shield, just because I know that a nerf is coming. So until then, we'll just see what happens. Anyway, so what this build excels in is map clear, particularly breaches. I played a Witch Hunter with the Explodey Ascendancy node, and I gotta say, the Herald explosion from this build are just so much more satisfying. Explosive shot with minimal investment deals quite a respectable amount of damage, single target damage. Paired with some AoE nodes on the tree and the Herald explosion, what you're seeing here is the pinnacle of satisfaction when it comes to mapping. It is quite tempting to overjuice your breaches, but because we're not that tanky, it is easy to get swarmed by monsters and just die, and you just lose everything. So I try to keep my juicing to a minimal level, and I try to avoid looting as well until I complete the breach. Since we are on a timer, and I've noticed I've died a few times in the midst of looting. Now, if you're new to POE, I would highly recommend trying out this build at least once just to see what it feels like. Disclaimer though, it might be miserable to go back to regular mapping without heralds once you've had a taste of what this feels like. As for single target, we trivialize all map bosses. What you're seeing here is a T15 plus 1 boss. Obviously, StormBurst rounds is carrying the single target damage, so it's not a problem for this build. The order of play here is to cast Voltaxic Mark on the boss, shoot it with an explosive shot until you see the shock icon, which is usually just 1 or 2 attempts, and then just go to town with StormBurst rounds. If needed, press emergency reload and continue unloading your StormBurst rounds. Here is a clip of my first breach boss attempt, and I'll be honest, we don't have the greatest single target, but it's not bad. I've also upgraded a few gear pieces since then, adjusted my tree a little bit to include more shock magnitude, which I'll talk about in a second, and I'm excited to attempt this again. I'm pretty sure we're gonna have way more DPS than what you're seeing here. So my philosophy since POE 1 has always been to focus on either clear speed or single target boss killing. It is unlikely that you're gonna get both unless you're spending mirrors on your gears, or if you're playing an overpowered build like a Spark Stormweaver or something like that, which will probably get nerfed. So that is why for this build we are focused entirely on just mapping, doing breaches, and that is pretty much 90% of what we do here. Alright, so here are some important things that I want to highlight about the build. Starting with Rarity. So unfortunately, with the current state of the game, getting Rarity on your gear is mandatory, I would say. I'll go as far to say that you should probably sacrifice a resist suffix for it. If you're just entering maps from the campaign, you can ignore Rarity for now and just focus on defense and surviving until you get to your red maps, which is the T11 plus Waystones. Once you're in that zone, I would assume you've already farmed up some currency, so you are simply shorting yourself if you ignore Rarity. The loot difference is night and day, especially if you're farming stuff like Breach. You're pretty much dropping a Divine every 2 to 3 maps with decent Rarity. I have about 80 to 100% Rarity on my gear right now, and it's a big difference. Next would be balancing your shock chance, shock duration, and shock magnitude. So I don't see this been talked a lot about, but getting decent shock chance is very important because without shocking, you're not going to be able to use your shock burst rounds. Now, explosive shot one-shots most of the trash mobs anyway, but for the tanky rares and your map bosses, you will want to be shocking reliably and long enough for you to unload your shock burst rounds. So there are many ways to get these on your gear and your tree. When you are just entering your maps, I would prioritize getting Emboldened Avatar, as you can see here. So this here basically gives you some chance to shock, and also making sure to run a conduction support, as this gives you 100% more chance to shock. Now, if you're not aware already, we're shocking with our fire damage from explosive shot because we are using a 3 Dragon's Helm, which is a mandatory component of this build. And you can also get shock chance and shock duration early on with jewels. As you can see here, I have chance to shock and shock duration here, and also chance to inflict ailments, which is another mod equivalent to chance to shock. So those two mods I would say are very important early on just to get consistent shocks. Now, once you've progressed past T11 Waystones, you want to start investing into shock magnitude, which will significantly increase your damage. And the easiest way to do this is by allocating Frazzle. These 4 nodes here gives you a lot of shock magnitude, which brings my shock from about 20% all the way up to 35 to 38% on bosses. So that is a good amount of additional damage that the monsters are taking. Now, the next thing is weapon swap. So weapon swap is also mandatory, not just for more damage, but for quality of life. If you're not aware, or if you're new to playing crossbows, crossbows has a unique playstyle where you are essentially, you have a crossbow shot, which is your default firing skill. So I'm gonna remove my second crossbow here, and as you can see, we have 1 crossbow shot, and then you have your reloading rounds or your ammos basically. So we're gonna have load explosive shot, which is reloading it. So what happens is you will reload your weapon, and then you would fire your explosive shot like that, and then you reload it again and you fire. So that's how it works. Now, if you are simply using 1 crossbow, you would have to reload your explosive shot and then reload your shock burst rounds separately. I think right now we gotta set this to 1. There we go. So you would fire your explosive shot, and then when you want to use shock burst rounds, you would press R, and then this would allow you to fire your shock burst rounds. So you would constantly need to alternate between 2 key buttons to reload and then fire. So now that we have 2 crossbows, as you can see here, we would then assign explosive shot to crossbow 1, for example, and shock burst rounds to crossbow 2. And this allows us now to have 2 crossbow shots here, as you can see, and I've bind it to my left click and my right click. And now what we can do is then we would load explosive shot into our right click, and then we would load shock burst rounds to our left click. And now you don't have to reload anymore. You just basically turns it into a 2-button build where your right click is your explosive shot, and then when you're ready to do shock burst rounds, you just left click, it's going to use that right away. So you no longer have to reload it, and this is a huge quality of life improvement for just swapping your weapons. The other thing with weapon swapping is obviously you specialize in damage. So with explosive shot, you would want to get an additional bolt, as you can see here. Starting off, you can get a 350 PDPS crossbow with an additional bolt for about 5 exalts, and a 450 to 500 PDPS crossbow for shock burst rounds without the additional bolt. For explosive shot, I would recommend getting the additional bolt because it basically allows you to shoot 2 shots before reloading. This will not only speed up your clear, but it also reduces your mana expenditure, since reloading is the part that costs mana. Now when shopping, prioritize PDPS, attacks per second, and additional bolt as shown here. For Shockburst rounds, we don't need the additional bolt, so you want to get a higher PDPS weapon. Starting out, anything above 450 is good. If possible, get one with an attack speed roll as well, since attack speed does affect reload speed and it's going to make your mapping feel much better. Alright, now as for the passive tree, this is what it looks like. You can pause it during the video here, but a couple things to note is the weapon swap portion. For your explosive shot, we are grabbing these shock magnitude here. Again, your explosive shot is the one that is shocking, so make sure to grab these. And we're also grabbing the AoE nodes here, which I would say is very important, but prioritize the AoE first over the shock magnitude, just because it makes clearing the map a lot better. So these are for your explosive shot, and then for your shockburst rounds, we are grabbing these nodes here for the lightning damage, penetrate, and also lucky hit, and also we're filling out this wheel here for shockburst rounds. But yeah, we're grabbing dexterity here. Common calamity is really good, and just filling out everything else here. This attribute wheel is actually very important, I would say, to grab it, just because when you're running Tri-Herald, the stat requirement is quite high. You need 178 dex here, you need 97 int, and a bunch of strength as well. So in addition to needing strength attributes on your gear, I would grab this wheel here as well. And finally, because we are running Tri-Herald with Wind Dancer and Overwhelming Presence, you need to get a 50 Spirit Amulet here. Something like that, we just Spirit and then some stats, shouldn't be too expensive. And I anointed Step Like Miss, which is this node here that gives you some movement speed and some mana regen, which is quite nice. Alright, and then Ascendancy, we did complete our 4th lab, so the final lab we grab Windward to give us some more defenses. And as for the gear, this is what our crossbow looks like. This was upgraded as I entered T15 maps, so it's a higher DPS explosive shot crossbow. It's about 470, I believe. And then this one here is for our shockburst rounds, which is about a 600 PDPS crossbow. And then we have our 3 dragons, body armor with high evasion, just some basic rings, again prioritizing rarity whenever you can. I have them here, and my gloves, and then just a belt with some life and resist, 30% movement speed boots with life and resist, and that's about it. For our jewels, shock duration, projectile damage, increased damage is all good. I'm gonna grab this later on here, but we also have like shock duration, magnitude of ailments. Again, those are the most important stats. But yeah, that is the build overview. Currently characters level 89 with cap resistances, 70 evasion with acrobatics. I wouldn't grab acrobatics until you have about 20k evasion without acrobatics. So once you grab it, your evasion tanks quite a bit down to 7,000. But once we have our tailwind stacks here, it goes up to 76%. So it's quite nice. So yeah, hopefully this build helps you out. If you have any questions, let me know in the comment section below. For the next goal of this character is to just farm up the pinnacle content. Right now we are still early in our tree here. We just did 1 breach. We're gonna finish out the breach wheel here, finish out the map bosses, and then hopefully find the citadels so we can run those as well. So yeah, hopefully you enjoyed the video. See you guys next time.